When you started using WordPress, a user account was created in your name. That user account has two purposes. On the private side, it allows you to customize the experience of using the WordPress admin panel. On the public side, it allows you to share information about yourself to the readers who visit your site. So now let's take a look at the settings you have for your user profile. You can get to your user profile either by going to your name up in the right-hand corner and selecting Edit My Profile, or you can go to the admin panel, find Users, and select Your Profile. This takes you to the profile page, which is separated into multiple different sections. The first section has to do with personal options for interacting with the WordPress admin panel. Here you can choose to toggle the visual editor in the post and page editors on and off. By default, it's turned on, so you can see your own images and other content in the visual editor, but in some cases you may want to disable it so you only see the HTML code. This is rare, so in most cases you want to leave this option alone. The next option allows you to change the admin color scheme for your site. This is only changing the admin color scheme and only for your personal profile, so it doesn't change anything for anyone else, and it also doesn't change the front end of your site. The default option is this dark gray one. You can also switch it to a light option, a blue option, a coffee colored option, ectoplasm, midnight, ocean, and sunrise. You can experiment with these and see how they impact your mood and whether or not you like these particular color schemes as you're working with WordPress. This is entirely optional, and you can change it at any time. So you can change it now and then come back and change it later and customize this experience to what you like the most. Personally, I only like the dark ones, so I either go for default or for midnight, but that is entirely a personal decision. And if you change it and you don't like it, you can just come back and change it again later. Below Admin Color Scheme, you have Keyboard Shortcuts, and this option enables shortcuts for comment moderation. If you want to use this feature, I urge you to click on the More Information link and go read the information about this. This is extremely useful if you're managing a WordPress site that gets lots of comments, but for most people, it's not really necessary. The final option under Personal Options is the toolbar. By default, when you set up WordPress, you will also see the toolbar when you are logged in and you're on the front end. I've been using the toolbar throughout this course, and you've noticed how useful it is. You can navigate back and forth, you can create new posts and pages, and you can do other things constantly from the toolbar. But in some cases, you may want to hide the toolbar when viewing the site, and this is where you would do that. By unchecking the toolbar option, the toolbar will disappear from the front end of the site for you. Not from the back end, just from the front end. If you do choose to turn the toolbar off and you're worried that you can no longer navigate back and forth between the post editor and the actual post, you don't have to worry, because most themes have an edit button built in that shows up as long as you're logged in right underneath the title of the post. So you can still navigate to that post editor. You just can't do it from the toolbar anymore. The next section is your name. Depending on how you set up your site, there may be lots of information here or there may be no information here. Right now, all that it displays is my username, which is Morten, and this username cannot be changed. Now I can choose to add my full name and my last name, and if I want to, I can change my nickname. Now here's a trick. I recommend changing your nickname to something other than your username, and there's a very simple reason for that. When a hacker comes to your site, and this will happen, someone will try to hack your site, the first thing they'll do is they'll look for your nickname, and then they'll assume that your nickname is the same as your username, and they'll try to log into your site using your nickname. So if you change the nickname, something other than your username, it'll be much harder for them to access your site. Of course, this is a very rudimentary way of protecting your site, and later in the course I'll talk about much more stringent ways of protecting your site. And WordPress is pretty safe, but this is a simple thing you can do that will make a huge difference. Now that you've entered your first and last name, you can choose to change how your name is displayed on the site. If you look at the site right now, and I go into a post here, you'll see currently my name is displayed simply as Morten because that's all the information WordPress had. Now that I've input a new first name, a last name, and a nickname, I can use this dropdown to select how I want to display my name. I can either display my username, my first name, my last name, the combination of my first name and my last name, the combination of my last name and my first name, or my nickname. So I'm going to change this to my first and last name and scroll down and save it. And now when I reload my page, you'll see my name is publicly displayed as my full name. The next section is contact info. Now the email section here is the most important one. This is the email that WordPress will use to associate you with your account, meaning if you forget your password or lose it, WordPress will email you at this email address. If you get comments on your site and they're held for moderation, WordPress will email you at this address. This is not a public address, so no one else can see it. This is the address WordPress uses to track you. Now you may have noticed that when I log in, my face is associated with my account. This is also related to the email because WordPress is using the email address added to my contact info to pull my headshot from a service called Gravatar. Now we're going to set up Gravatar for you later on in the course and then associate your account with the Gravatar profile so you can get your picture there too. And this is how that's linked together. One important thing to remember about your email address is that you can only have one user account per email address. So if you're setting up multiple user accounts for yourself, you also have to have multiple email addresses. Below email, you can also choose to add your website if you want to. If you do add your website, it will be displayed publicly in your profile if there's a profile page for you on the site. So you have to choose whether you want to do this or not. The same goes for the biographical information. If you choose to add biographical information, it may be displayed on the site, but it depends on the theme you're using. Let me give you an example. If I add some biographical information here and save my profile, I can now go to the site and you'll remember that under About, there's a contributors page that has information about the contributors. Here you see my picture, which is associated with my email address, as I explained previously, and now it also displays my bio right here. Depending on the theme you're using, this bio may be displayed in many different places. A lot of themes have an author box that appears directly underneath each post that displays the headshot, the name, and the bio information of the person who wrote that post. But this is entirely theme dependent. Usually, adding bio information in your profile will activate those features. If you don't add bio information, the feature will not be activated. Last but not least, on your profile page is where you can set a new password and repeat that password. This is actually a really important part of the profile page because it allows you to reset your password if you forgot it, or it allows you to change your password if you think it's been compromised. The password strength indicator here is actually really smart. So if you try to do something that includes your own name, you'll see it'll tell you it's really weak. So you have to come up with a pretty strong password for WordPress to tell you it's a good password. So play around with this and come up with a good password that's strong and that you can remember. And then later in the course, I'll show you some additional steps you can do to make your site even safer. Once you're done setting up your profile and you're happy with it, click Update Profile. And remember, like with everything else in WordPress, if at any time you want to change something, just come back and change it. Nothing is ever permanent. In the previous movie, I showed you how my profile picture is associated with my email address so that it shows up in different parts of my site. You can see it here in the back end, where my user account is registered. You can also see it up here in the corner. There's a profile picture of me on the contributors page. And if I make a comment on a post within the site, you'll also see my face show up in the comments. This all works because of a system called Gravatar that was created by the same people that created WordPress. Gravatar allows you to create one avatar online that you associate with your email address, and then anytime you make a comment or do something else with a site that has Gravatar activated, that profile photo will appear next to your name. So if you want your profile photo to appear next to your name within your user profile, and also when you make comments on your own site and other WordPress sites and other sites on the web, you need to set up a Gravatar profile. you simply go to gravatar.com and create an account. You can click on Create Your Own Gravatar here, and it'll help you walk through the process of setting up an account. I'm not going to go through that process with you because it's pretty straightforward. Instead, I'm going to show you my own personal account here. So I'm going to sign in to my Gravatar account. Here I need to enter the email address that I'm using and my password. And once I'm logged in, you can see that here I've actually uploaded a long list of different avatars that I've used over the years. Now I want to update my avatar, so I'm going to add a new image. I'm going to click on Add New Image here, and then I'm going to upload an image from my computer's hard drive. I'll choose a file, find the file I'm looking for here, and upload it. From here, I can now crop the image if I want to, but I think this is okay. So I'm going to click Crop and Finish. I need to rate the Gravatar, because in some cases you may upload a Gravatar that is not appropriate for all ages, but this one is, so I'm going to set it to G. And now, as the internet updates, you'll see that this new avatar will appear in place of my old one. This is actually really neat, because it means any blog on the internet that has Gravatar activated where I commented, no matter how long ago that was, will now get my updated user profile picture. So anytime you update your Gravatar on any site on the web that has that activated. Now don't worry if that doesn't happen immediately. It takes some time to propagate through the whole web, but it works really well when it does. Gravatar also allows you to add additional information to your profile. So if you go to my profile here, you'll see in addition to having just a picture, I also have my full name, my display name. There's an About Me section where you can see information about me. There's a photo gallery, and I've also associated websites and other information with this profile. You can see this on the front end of the site if you go to gravatar.com/Morten. And here you can see all the information about me, my headshot, my profile bio, and some websites that I've uploaded to it. I've also associated Gravatar with some of my social network profiles, for example, Twitter, Flickr, and LinkedIn, so people can find me easily. Just like WordPress, Gravatar evolves constantly, so you can expect to see more features pop up here, so it's a good idea to log in from time to time and add new features. But now that I've created my Gravatar, and I've created an account in my WordPress site with the same email address, you'll see that my new profile picture will start appearing on my own site. So now that you have Gravatar set up for your own profile, you should see your face appear in your user admin, and also whenever you comment on your own blog or other blogs that have Gravatar associated with them. Now that you've set up your own profile in your WordPress site, you may want to invite some other people to contribute or administer the site as well. There are several reasons why you may want to do this. You may be working in a team and multiple people should have access to the site, or you may want to invite someone in to contribute to the site so you don't have to write all your content. There's also situations where you want to let the public register for your site so they can get access to locked information or can store their own information and interact with people through the site itself. WordPress allows you to register as many users as you want within the site, and you can assign roles to each of these users so you can control what they can and cannot do when they are logged in. We'll cover roles and capabilities in the next movie. In this movie, we'll look at how to add and manage new users. So let's say I have a coworker named Amy that I want to add to my site. To add a new user, I can go to the admin panel, find users, and under all users, click the Add New button. I can also go directly to the Users button and click Add New, or I can simply go to the toolbar, hover over New, and select User. In the Add New User panel, I need to give the new user a username, and I need to provide the email address to the user. Now you'll remember, this is the email address that the user will use to get access to the content, WordPress will use to email content to the user, and WordPress will tie to the profile picture and other information from Gravatar. So make sure you're using the correct email address for this new user. You don't need to fill out the rest of the information here, first name, last name, and website. That can be done by the user when they register, or you can do it later. What you do need to provide is a password. So here I'm going to put in a password. And now WordPress will send an email to Amy telling her she has become a subscriber to the site. If I want to, I can check this box. And now WordPress will also send the password to Amy so she can log in directly. Now, there's a lot of discussion on whether or not it's a good idea to send passwords by email, but I tend to check this box anyway, because whenever I add a new user to a WordPress site, I always tell her you need to go in to your profile and change your password immediately, because otherwise I know their password, and that's not a good idea. Finally, I need to set a role for my new user. Like I said, we'll cover roles in the next movie, so here I'm just going to change this to contributor and click Add New User. Now that the new user is created, I can see her listed under users, and I can go in and edit her information. To edit it, I simply hover over her name, click on the name or click on Edit. And here I get the same user profile editor that I got for myself. I can change whether or not this user sees the visual editor. I can change the admin color scheme, the keyboard shortcuts, and the toolbar, and I can also provide information about the user. I can get access to all this information because I am the administrator. The user will also be able to get access to this information, but any user that's on the site that is not an administrator and not Amy will not be able to get access to her information. That way, if you register a new user and you know that they're not going to configure this information, you can do it for them and they don't have to worry about it. Or if the site is acting in a funny way, let's say it doesn't show up the toolbar, you can log in and then go and change the setting here to make sure that that user can see the toolbar. Now, earlier I mentioned that in some cases you may want to let the general public register to your site. If you want to enable that function, you need to go to Settings and General, and here you find a box called Membership. If you check this box, then anyone can register on your site. If you let people register, you also need to give them a new role, and by default, that role is Subscriber. Being a subscriber to the site just means that you can log into the site. You can only log in and change your own profile. You can't do anything else. But there are several reasons why you may want to do this. For one, you can restrict commenting on your site only to people who are registered on the site. So to comment, you have to register. Another reason might be that you've made all the posts or pages on your site private, and you only want people with access to be able to see those posts or pages. A third reason is that if you limit access to content or commenting on your site, and you force people to register, you can get information about them, you can email them, and if they're not acting nice, you can go and delete their user profiles off your site, or even block their user profiles by changing their passwords. That way, you have control over who gets access to your site, but you can still leave it open for people to register. If you have users on your site that you no longer want to have registered, or they no longer want to contribute to your site, you can also delete an existing user. To delete a user, simply hover over their name and click Delete. Now you may wonder, what happens if that user has already created posts? Well, you can see it right here. If the user has created and published posts on your site, WordPress will need to attribute those posts to an existing user that is not being deleted. Here you have two options. You can either choose to delete all the posts that this user created, or you can attribute all the posts to a separate user in your site. This is very important because all posts created under WordPress need to have a user assigned to them. So if you delete a user, you need to reassign all those posts. But WordPress makes sure to remind you so you don't have to worry when you delete new users. Once you have several users registered to your site, you can manage their access to the site using the different roles that come with WordPress. By default, WordPress has 5 different role levels: subscriber, contributor, author, editor, and administrator. So let's go through them and see the differences between them. The subscriber level is the lowest level of user. This is a person who can access everything on the front end of the site and can also access their own user profile. Like I explained in the previous movie, the only purpose of having subscribers is if you A, want them to subscribe to your site, B, want them to be able to comment on your site if you restrict comments only to subscribers, and C, want them to see posts or pages that are published privately, Remember that setting under Publish where it said Private? Well, if you set it to Private, only subscribers and above can see that content. The next option is Contributor. A contributor can create content for your site and submit that content for review. The contributor can see her own content and edit that content as long as it's not been published. But once an editor or an administrator decides to publish the content, the contributor can no longer edit it. An author can create and publish her own content, but she cannot edit anyone else's content. An editor can create and publish her own content and edit other people's content and publish that content, while an administrator can control every feature of the site. Now let's take a look at what the admin panel looks like when I log in as Amy. As you can see, Amy is a contributor. So I'm going to open a separate incognito window, go to my site, and here I'm going to log in as Amy. Here you see that the admin panel for Amy is quite different from the one I have. That's because Amy is a contributor. She can only create content and she can see the comments from within the site, but she can't make any changes to the site as a whole. You can see she can't make pages, she can't look at the feedback, and she can't change any of the settings of the site. Now I can create a post as Amy. So here you see if I go to New, all I can do is create a post. And in the post, I can give the post a title and put in some text content. And now you'll notice that though I have the same tools for editing text that I did when I was logged in as an administrator, I don't have the capability of uploading media items. That's because the contributor can only contribute text. If the contributor wants to add anything else, say images, they have to ask someone else to do that for them. And this is so that you can restrict who is able to submit files to your server. And that can be a very important security limitation. Now that I'm finished writing this post on behalf of Amy, I can save my draft and I can also preview my post, but I can't publish it. All I can do is click Submit for Review. Now my post has been submitted for review, and if I come in as Amy, I can now see my post here. You see, the only post that's listed here under mine is Amy's, and it's pending review. Now I can go back to the window where I'm logged in as administrator and go to Posts. And you'll see here we have Amy's first post and it's pending review. Now you also notice there's a very interesting feature that is available in newer versions of WordPress that tells you whether or not someone else is currently editing a post. This post is locked right now because Amy's currently editing it. So I'm going to override Amy's editing by simply opening it. WordPress will tell me someone else is currently editing this. Do you want to take over? So I'm going to say yes, I want to take over this post. And because I'm the administrator, I can now edit the post and I can also add media items if I want to. From here, I can either click Save as Pending because this is pending review, or I can choose to publish the post. If I publish the post and go to the front page, you'll see the post will appear right here. But if I log in as Amy again and click on All Posts, you'll see now that the post has been published, I can no longer edit it. All Amy can do is view the post. If I decide that Amy is a good contributor, I may give her extra privileges. Let's say I want to give her the ability to edit and also publish her own posts. I can go back to my dashboard, go to Users and All Users, and go in to Edit Amy. And here I can change her role from contributor to author. I'll update her user profile. And now when I go back to the page where I'm logged in as Amy and simply reload this page, you'll see that because Amy is now an author, she can still edit the post that was published. Again, you see WordPress is telling me that someone else is currently editing this post, and Amy can now go into the post and take over the post and make edits to it that she can update on the site. Using these different roles, you can ensure that the different people who have access to your site can only access the elements that they need to access. The general rule is to have as few administrators as possible because an administrator can change the entire site and they can also delete other administrators. So if you give someone else administrator access, they have the power to reduce your level of access or even delete your account. Generally, you want to give contributors contributor access, authors author access, and only the people who are responsible for all the content on the blog editor status. In most cases, I only give 1 or 2 people administrator access to a WordPress site, and I often even create a separate administrator account for them, so when they publish content, they do it either as authors or as editors instead. That way, if someone somehow manages to get a hold of their account information, they'll only be able to edit content. They won't be able to administer the site as a whole. In addition to changing the settings for your own profile and the profiles of the other people you let use your WordPress installation, we can change the settings for WordPress itself. This is done under the Settings option and General. We've already looked at some of these settings previously. Here you see we have the site title and tagline, which we could also configure from the customizer. You also have an email address. Now, this is the same email address as your admin email address that you use to set up the account. Now, this is the email address WordPress will use to notify you about things that happen on the site, let's say updates or comments that are held for moderation and things like that. You might want to change this if you don't want those emails to land in your inbox, but it's important to have an email address that works here. Previously, we addressed the anyone can register option. By default, it's set to off, and unless you want people to be able to register for your site, you should leave it off. If you do activate it, be careful that the new user default role is set to subscriber, so that people don't get more privileges than they should have. Now let's take a look at the rest of these features, starting with these two, WordPress address URL and site address URL. By default, these are set to wherever you installed WordPress, and in most cases, that's how they should stay. The reason why you have 2 lines here is because in some rare cases, you may want to place WordPress in its own folder and then display it as if it was living in a different folder. In those cases, you would put in one address for WordPress address and another for the site address. This is a custom situation, and if you want to apply that situation, you should go check out the article linked right here to be different from the directory, and it'll take you to the Codex article that explains how to do this. But like I said, in most cases, that's an advanced option you don't need to use. Scrolling down, you have your time zone. Now, this is the time zone that WordPress uses to count time. So right now, it's set to UTC +0, meaning this is basically Greenwich Mean Time. So if I set a post to publish at noon on Friday, it'll publish at noon on Friday in England. But I'm not in England, I'm in Vancouver in Canada. So I'm going to change this to where I am. So I'm going to type in Vancouver, and look, Vancouver is on the list. Now, depending on where you live, your city might not be on the list, and in that case, you can find the standard UTC time, or you can find a time to the time zone that you're currently in, like another city that's close by you. You can also choose to change how the date format is displayed. By default, it's the American Standard, December 20th, 2013, but you can change it to a multitude of different standards. For example, if you live in Norway, you'd probably change it to 2012-2013. This is completely up to you. You can also change it to your own custom format if you want to by using the custom feature and reading the documentation for that. The same goes for time. By default, time is displayed in the American Standard, AM and PM in lowercase, but you can change it to any of these other standards if you want to. Finally, you can choose what day of the week you want the week to start on. This affects the calendar within WordPress, and if you display the calendar in your sidebar, for instance, this affects any calendar you may use inside WordPress. So for example, if you display the WordPress calendar as a widget in your sidebars or footers, then this will impact what day is set as the start day of the week. By default, it's Monday, but you can change it to another day if you want to. Once you've made changes to these settings, remember to click Save Changes to apply them. Now let's also look briefly at the writing settings. This page allows you to change things like whether or not WordPress should auto-format emoticons into actual graphics, so I'm going to turn that off. You can also get WordPress to correct invalidly nested XHTML automatically. If you're going to paste a lot of HTML into your content, you may want to do this just so that any errors get caught. But this is a rare occurrence, especially nowadays, because no one writes XHTML anymore. So this is more of a legacy option for older blog posts. This is also where you'll remember you can set the default post category that we changed earlier in the course, and you can also set the default post format. This Press This option is actually a bookmark that you can add to your toolbar in your browser. And that way, if you find something interesting online, you can simply click the Press This button and it'll allow you to push that content directly to your blog right away. This is a custom option for people who blog a lot. I've never really used it because I don't create content this way, but if that's something that sounds like it matters to you, then try it and see what happens. Below Press This, you have this Post via Email option, and this is interesting. If you're out traveling or you're not able to access the WordPress interface for some reason, you can set this up so that you can email yourself and then that email becomes a post on your site. This requires that you wire your email server to WordPress, and this requires a bit of a setup to make it work. But once it works, it actually works quite well, so you'll be able to email your site and automatically get updates on the front page. This is a very blog-focused feature, so I don't see a lot of people use it, but the ones that do are able to do some pretty cool things with it. At the very bottom, you see this title that says Update Services, and right now it says WordPress is not notifying any update service because of your site's visibility settings. Now, when I installed WordPress on my local server, I didn't check the box at the bottom during the install that said list this site on Google and other search engines. I intentionally didn't do that because as I'm building out my site, I don't want the search engines to index the content I'm putting in the site as I'm building it out because I might be experimenting and changing things. Now that I'm ready to take my site live, I can change these settings so that my site becomes visible for search engines. So I'm going to click on this link that goes to visibility settings, and this takes me to the reading panel. Here at the bottom, you see that currently search engine visibility is set to discourage search engines from indexing this site. Now that I want to take my site live, I'm going to uncheck that, and that way search engines will be able to access my site and will be able to index the content. I'll click Save Changes, and then I can go back to my writing settings. Now at the bottom here, you'll see I'll be able to add update services to my site. These are services that will be notified every time I make a change to my site. By default, the only service you have is this Ping-O-Matic service, but you can add additional services if you want to. I usually add all the available update services that are suggested in the codex by following this link. I'll open it in a separate tab here, scrolling down, and simply copying out this whole list. So I'll copy the list and just paste it in. And now, whenever I make an update to my site, be that a new post or a new page or a new comment comes in, all of these different services will be notified of this new content, and this will encourage some search engines to index my site better. Finally, let's take a brief look at that reading page. When we were in here to encourage search engines to index the site, you may have noticed that it started with front page displays. This is another of those settings that you also find in the customizer. This is its original location, so this is where you use to change that setting. The reading page is also where you control how many posts are displayed on the index pages of your site. By default, it's set to 10, meaning for every index page you see 10 posts, and then there's a next link. You can change this to any number. I like to set it to 12 because I find 12 to be a better number. And this is also where you can set the syndication feed. So that would be if someone is subscribing to your site using an RSS feed. You can change the number of posts that are in that feed here as well. Finally, you can decide if you want the full text or just a summary to be in your RSS feed. Now, this is important if you have advertising on your site, because if you have advertising, you probably want people to come and see the actual site and not just read your content in an RSS reader. If you have advertising on your site, or if you have another reason that you want people to actually come visit your site, I suggest setting it to summary. But if you just want to ensure that people are able to read your content and disseminate it throughout the web, I suggest setting it to full text. It's completely up to you, and it depends on your use scenario. Like with all the other settings in WordPress, these require a bit of experimentation. But now you know what they do and how you can configure them. So now you can configure them to fit with your needs.